weighs more than 2,100 tons. And it takes 11 diesel engines to move her. Fully extended, her boom rises up 567 feet. So tall, planes need to be warned of her presence. The Lamson Transilift 3 is the largest crane in North America. They call her Big Blue, and when something this size rolls into town, people take notice. On the afternoon of July 14th, 1999, a crowd had gathered to watch the giant crane. She was lifting a huge roof section for the new baseball stadium that was to be the pride of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. News helicopters hovered overhead, recording the moment for the evening news. Curious onlookers have brought their cameras and camcorders, ready to capture a piece of civic history. But the images they capture at 5:15 that afternoon will stun the entire nation.
Watch it, watch it.
The collapse is sudden and devastating. An instrument used for measuring earthquakes records the crash more than 5 miles away. 3 construction workers lose their lives as steel and concrete rain down. The shocking images stun Milwaukee. The stadium looks like a bomb went off inside. What brought Big Blue down? It's as American as it gets. A night at the ballpark. On a beautiful Memorial Day weekend, officials expect a near-capacity crowd. Since it opened in 2001, Miller Park Stadium has become a Milwaukee landmark. It is the culmination of a dream for some and an enormous source of civic pride for the entire city. Jeff Jenkins is the Brewers' left fielder.
It's a great park. Obviously, fans love it, and anytime you have a state-of-the-art ballpark, it's always fun playing in it.
It means a lot to the city, and it means a lot to the players and the ownership. And I think now a lot of people want to come and play here for the Milwaukee Brewers. The city is well known now because of the Miller Park.
Looking around Miller Park, it's difficult to believe the dream began as nightmare. And it's hard to imagine the 30 seconds of terror and confusion that brought this city to a standstill. Back in the late 1990s, it was still just a dream. In those days, the Brewers were playing in County Stadium. It was old and run down, an embarrassment for the players and the city. Miller Park would change all that. It would be first class, 42,000 seats, and a state-of-the-art retractable roof.
We'd go on the road, we'd come back, and you'd see like some new things built here or there, and new blocks going up, and finally some seating and all that. So obviously it was, it's a long process, but it was one that was exciting to watch.
July 14th, 1999, 11 months into the construction of Miller Park. The stadium is far from complete. Steelworkers are busy assembling its giant roof sections. To save time and reduce risk, the pieces are built on the ground and then hoisted into place by the mother of all cranes. Officially, it's called the Lamson Transilift 3, but the people of Milwaukee affectionately call her Big Blue. At 567 feet tall, she's the second largest structure on the Milwaukee skyline. So big she needs a permit from the Federal Aviation Authority. Since arriving in Milwaukee, Big Blue's become a local celebrity.
Anytime you had a line of sight going anywhere towards the stadium, the line of sight was dominated by that humongous crane. And it was quite the event. It was quite a press event. Big Blue coming to town. You could say that people almost, like Big Blue was somebody.
It was so huge. And with such a large crane, and what it was doing was creating an icon and a symbol for the city, and securing the future of baseball. And
By any measure, Big Blue is an amazing machine. It takes 4 men to control her, one moving each of the 2 crawlers on the ground. Another in a cab 20 feet high, controlling more than 6 miles of cable. A 4th coordinates the delicate job via radio.
I eat, breathe, and sleep crane. I love it. It doesn't matter to me what the project is. I enjoy being a crane operator. And in that case there, I was the general foreman for all the operators.
Charlie Christie is sitting on top of the crane cab, operating 2 winches that keep the massive roof section level as Big Blue lifts it into place. The roof section is as big as a football field, and a skilled operator can make tiny adjustments, shifting its position by as little as 1/8 of an inch. But each of the dozens of movements that make up a pick have to be planned out and meticulously choreographed.
They're well planned, right down to how much bearing pressure would be put on the ground, what time of day preferred, early morning. They try to coordinate other crafts to be out of the area so that they don't bring the load over their heads. Check, double check. Rigging has to be just so, the attitude of the piece has to be just right.
So far, Big Blue has a perfect record. In the last 11 months, she has successfully hoisted 10 of the enormous roof sections into place. But July 14th, 1999 will be disastrously different. And the giant crane that had become a fixture on the Milwaukee skyline will suddenly disappear. Late in the afternoon of July 14th, 1999, Big Blue is hard at work. The crane is moving a giant piece of the roof for the new Milwaukee baseball stadium into place. The pick should have been done earlier, but the crane operators have been delayed by the weather.
First part of the day we had some weather push through, some real sparse rain, some high winds. They shut us down, and then later in the afternoon they give us the go-ahead. The winds had laid down enough, they said, to make the lift. Had no reason to suspect anything would be wrong.
At 5 p.m., Big Blue slowly inches forward. A massive 450-ton roof section suspended below her boom. Even with 11 diesel engines to power it, the huge crane creeps along at a snail's pace. Inside the stadium, ironworkers William DeGrave, Jerome Starr, and Jeffrey Wisher begin their ascent in a smaller mobile crane. They will rendezvous with a giant roof section high above the stadium and help guide it into place. As Big Blue inches toward the stadium, Bob Winkle and Lance Wallace pass by on Interstate 94. Both men are crane fans who have waited months to see Big Blue in action.
We went to Farm Progress Days in La Crosse, and we were heading back and had seen the lift in the morning. It was a few feet off the ground. But as we came back down 94, they had it suspended up over the building.
It was, on our way home, so we got off the freeway. I knew I had my camera with me, and I like taking pictures, so that was why we stopped.
Lance Wallace and Bob Winkle aren't the only spectators at Miller Park. One of the curious is Father Anthony Zimmer. He's one of 4 priests who've been invited on a special tour of the construction site by the project's architect.
I lived not too far from there, so every day I saw the progress, piece by piece by piece, and it was very exciting to watch that, and you see them doing a pick and a lift, and wow, how do they do that?
Her slow journey toward the stadium complete, Big Blue begins lowering the huge roof section into place. From his vantage point inside the stadium, Jerome Starr gives instructions to Big Blue's crew. Once the piece was in place, DeGrave and Wisher will help secure it to the stadium. As the maneuver begins, Pat Ostrenga and his colleagues have just finished a meeting at the site. Ostrenga is an inspector with America's Occupational Health and Safety Administration.
We finished up around 5, got out, took a look, and saw that the lift was in the air. And one of the people decided to head home, and 2 of us decided to stay late and just watch them do a lift.
As fate would have it, one of Ostrenga's colleagues has a video camera. As he points his camera toward the stadium, Ostrenga and his colleague have no way of knowing they are about to record the final images of Big Blue. Charlie Christie is working the crane's 2 tugger winches. Suddenly, he can feel that something is wrong.
Me and the iron worker that was with me felt the shudder in the crane. And he says, "You feel that?" And I says, "Yeah, I feel that."
Our first indication that anything was going wrong was when we heard the brake squeal on the crane and then a dull boom.
Lance Wallace and Bob Winkle are about 300 feet from the crane. From this vantage point, they can overhear radio contact between the crane operator and Jerome Starr inside the stadium.
We sat down, we're just watching, and then just a couple loud noises and some noise over the radios, and it was just sort of, you didn't know what's going on, and all of a sudden it's moving too fast. The crane actually, it looked like they made it move one way, and then it just came back the other way slightly and just never stopped. It just kept going.
It sounded like an explosion almost.
It was loud.
The ground vibrated, and as it vibrated, I knew that something was happening. It wasn't good.
And so we started to run. Bob's pulling me, and we're going, and I stopped. Just instinct was to turn around and shoot the pictures.
As Lance Wallace takes pictures of Big Blue's final moments, Father Zimmer and the rest of the tour group also become acutely aware of the danger.
And we were walking down the corridor, and we were stopping, and we were talking about the space and the design, and all of a sudden we just heard terrible noise, and it sounded like a plane was landing on top of us.
Big Blue is in her death throes. From his vantage point on top of the crane, Charlie Christie knows he's in trouble. The crane's massive boom arm is literally being torn apart.
As it was going up and over, I realized where I was at, and the first thing I did, I says, "Lord," I said, "don't let this thing break short and cut me in half." I said, "I just want to go home with my family tonight." And I said that out loud.
And then you heard this metal on metal crushing and just collapsing. I turned, and like a clod, I fell. And my helmet went off, and I dislocated my left shoulder. All you could do was hear it, feel it. And so I was laying on the ground, and I thought, is this it? Is this how I'm gonna end my life?
Big Blue twists to the north before dropping to the ground. Construction radios crackle with the desperate cries of the men still inside the stadium. Then silence. Those who saw the collapse wonder how many are injured, how many dead. In the nearest Milwaukee fire hall, emergency personnel spring into action, but they can't believe what they're hearing.
The alarm goes off, and the call is for a crane collapse. And we didn't really think that much of it initially, because over the years we had responded to a lot of different types of calls that turned out to be something completely different than what it was we were being called out for. And we really couldn't conceive of, a crane going down, like what's gonna knock a crane down?
That's the question on everyone's mind. What brought this giant crane crashing to Earth? Was she toppled by high winds? Was the huge roof section dangling from the boom too heavy? Or was there some hidden defect in the crane itself that triggered the disaster? The city of Milwaukee was enthralled with the giant crane building a new landmark in the middle of the city. Every day, the massive crane was in operation. A crowd of onlookers gathered to watch, and many shot video of the crane in action. On July 14, 1999, one of those cameras caught Big Blue's last lift, the moment disaster struck. In the old ballpark next door, Brewers outfielder Jeff Jenkins is in practice.
And we heard this big thud, and every day we'd heard people working on the stadium. So just to hear something crash or nothing, you didn't think it was that much, but we came out and obviously saw that the crane had fallen.
Other spectators who'd gathered to watch the crane working also stare in disbelief.
It was all over so fast that it was, you're questioning yourself, was that supposed to happen?
We actually heard the crane operator telling people to get out. As it was happening, it's probably the worst feeling you can ever have. It's surreal.
Within minutes, emergency workers are en route to the site, answering an alarm they can't believe is real. But the moment they pull up outside the stadium, they can see for themselves that Big Blue is dead.
I got there and looking, the body is in place where it is, but the crane is just crumpled and laying. It was like a huge dinosaur, that had been suddenly felled, and it had collapsed over the wall.
Big Blue's cab has separated from its base, which still sits upright, its tracks firmly on the ground. Her massive boom lays sprawled across the stadium floor like a broken neck. Looking into Miller Park Stadium, it is impossible to imagine that this place will ever be a ballpark. First base is obliterated by an enormous spider web of broken steel.
More twisted steel than I have ever seen in my life. The steel was all over the place. Went to the center of the stadium and just massive destruction. An incredible amount of material down on the ground.
No one knows for certain how many men lay buried underneath the jumble of steel and broken concrete. Closer to home plate, the visiting priests emerge from the ruins.
And then with just dead silence, and you could see the dust coming through the opening, the archway, and you could see coming out. I couldn't believe that I wasn't killed. I couldn't believe that the whole thing didn't go down.
Slowly, other survivors begin to emerge, dazed from the dust and debris.
Literally, 100, 150 people, milling about, police shouting, and everyone with a shocked, dazed look on their face, really. People wandering around rather aimlessly.
Charlie Christie has survived the crash, but as the dust settles, he comes to an awful realization.
And the first thing that came to mind was all my people, everybody. And it's like, we got to check on everybody, do a head count.
It's the first question they're all asking. Did everyone get out alive? As Father Zimmer walks through the shattered stadium, he thinks he can see the answer.
We walked around the corner, and then we saw Big Blue just totally collapsed and the whole roof down. And I thought to myself, there are dead people in there.
Inside the stadium, Charlie Christie's worst fears are soon realized.
The operator that was on one of the infill tower cranes was just walking out of the dust on top of the track of his crane, and you could just see the stricken look in his face. And the first thing he said was, he says, "I lost him." He says, I was doing everything I could, and he says, and I looked up and they were gone. He says, and all I could see was green iron coming at me. And then I realized that we had lost somebody. We'd lost the 3 men in the basket that were on his machine, 3 friends.
And we now know the identity of those who were killed in yesterday's accident. They are 39.
William DeGrave, Jerome Starr, and Jeffrey Wisher were the 3 iron workers who'd been atop the smaller crane, waiting to bolt the roof piece in place. They are all dead. But could there be any more victims buried under the fallen concrete? On any given day, there are between 400 and 700 people working on the stadium.
We did a systematic search of each level with a sweep. Each team going through from a start point to a finish point. And things that they were looking for were like possible void spaces and anything that might indicate that workers had been there recently.
By 10:30 that evening, the Milwaukee Fire Department gives the all clear. Miraculously, the 3 ironworkers are the only victims. But for those who saw it happen, those few seconds of terror leave an indelible mark.
It was 11:30 before I was finished that night, and on the way home, you just kind of relive the whole day in your mind's eye as you're driving down the highway for an hour to get home. It sticks with you forever. You'll never forget it.
Just 2 days after the disaster at Miller Park, baseball in Milwaukee continues. Next door, in Old County Stadium, the Brewers are hosting Kansas City. They observe a moment of silence for the 3 ironworkers that lost their lives building the Brewers' new home. Each player wears a small local 8 patch representing the Ironworkers Union.
It was like there was a funeral pall that had been placed over Miller Park and over Milwaukee. There was just this sadness and disappointment and a lot of questions. Why? How?
The investigation takes on the feel of a murder mystery. Only this time, the detectives are forensic engineers.
The most rewarding thing about my job is finding who done it.
David Peraza is an investigating engineer with LZA Technology in New York City.
There are a lot of similarities between a forensic engineering investigation and a criminal investigation. For example, a murder. You have both cases you have suspects, both cases you have evidence.
Peraza and a legion of other forensic engineers eventually narrow the list of potential suspects to 3. Suspect number 1, the wind. Big Blue's design specifications clearly state that lifts should not be conducted in wind speeds greater than 20 miles per hour. What were the winds that day? Were they enough to bring the giant crane down? Suspect number 2, ground conditions. A crane the size of Big Blue must remain absolutely level. A slope of even a fraction of an inch at ground level might have been enough to tip the crane and its load tumbling into Miller Park Stadium. Suspect number 3, mechanical failure. Big Blue took 6 weeks to assemble. It had 567 feet of boom, 30,000 feet of steel cable. Could one small defect in the crane have been its downfall? The wind, ground conditions, mechanical failure, a rogues gallery of possible suspects. Which one dealt the final blow to the world's largest crane? In the months that follow, forensic engineers pick apart every element of this disaster. They will stretch samples of the crane's metal body to their limit. They will recreate every moment of Big Blue's last lift in meticulous detail. And eventually, they will solve the mystery. What killed Big Blue? At Miller Park in Milwaukee, forensic engineers sift through the rubble in an effort to understand what brought a giant crane crashing to the ground, killing 3 ironworkers. Of all the pieces of evidence gathered, none is more valuable than the video shot only a few feet away from Big Blue. It is an undeniable record of what happened on the afternoon of July 14th, 1999.
This video was absolutely essential to the investigation. It quickly helped us narrow down what the possible causes of the accident were.
The layman sees nothing more than blurry images of a crane collapse. But to someone who knows what to look for, it's a treasure trove of information.
You can see from this video, the first sign of a problem came from the base of the crane itself, from a loud bang. There's no signs of anything going wrong in the upper parts of the crane or in the pick itself.
The video enables investigators to rule out mechanical failure with the crane's giant boom. They can also see that there was nothing wrong with the crane's 30,000 feet of steel cable.
Now at this point in time, the roof panel is roughly in position horizontally and it is starting to be lowered. That sound that you hear now are the hoist brakes slowing the descent of the piece. Now you're going to hear a bang. You hear another bang, you see a puff of dust, and you see the operator from the front crawler run out. And now the tub of the crane has totally separated, allowing it to roll over and fall. That bang came from the base of the crane in the kingpin area.
The kingpin is what anchors Big Blue's boom to the massive twin crawler base, allowing the two to move independently. It's 18 inches wide and over 12 feet long, and it's held in place by a huge locking ring 3 inches thick. When the accident happened, Charlie Christie was operating the 2 tugger winches that kept the massive roof section level. He was sitting right on top of the kingpin.
By the grace of God, I seen that ring lift, and I jerked my head and chest back, and it launched past me. The center pin jumped up about 8 inches. When you're talking about something that's got a nut on it about that big around and that thick with the pin about like that in diameter, it leaps up and then the machine goes over.
So investigators know the kingpin failed. But was it a casualty of the collapse or its cause?
What we have is the full length of the kingpin. That's the top.
In a lab outside Milwaukee, engineers with Stork Technimet try to piece together what happened to that kingpin.
Now what we have is a locking ring that fit into a groove that was machined into the bottom of the kingpin.
Craig Brown is a metallurgical engineer at Stork Technimet.
There's a lip of metal that was here that retained that locking ring. So the pin actually pivoted with this as a retainer. The stresses involved with the failure bent the pin and literally sheared this metal off. So this was pulled off, literally ripped off. And so the final failure involved was the actual breaking of the bottom. When that broke, the kingpin could lift up and fall over. And that's when the actual crane cab collapsed.
Every fragment of the kingpin is carefully photographed and cataloged. The photographs are akin to police mugshots. In this case, each metal fragment is a suspect. Did some small flaw in the way the kingpin was manufactured lead to the disaster?
It's important to know exactly how the metal tore as the bottom portion of the kingpin was sheared off. Several samples were taken from different locations within that section so that we could do a complete evaluation.
The first sample Craig takes is called a macro sample. A pizza-shaped cross-section of the kingpin is cut and analyzed for small cracks in the steel structure. Then core samples are extracted from the kingpin. These are stretched to their limits to determine the tensile strength of steel across the whole kingpin section.
That work? Yeah.
The last sample is taken directly from the part of the kingpin that was sheared off.
A section was cut from this area that allowed us to evaluate the microstructure on both the kingpin body and the sheared off section so that we could see what the structure was at high magnification.
Technicians use a scanning electron microscope to check for tiny fractures that may have weakened the steel in the kingpin. They peered deep into the fracture surface to determine exactly how the metal tore apart.
We were able to show that the material tore in a ductile manner, which is a good fracture mode. It wasn't brittle, it wasn't improperly heat treated, so that showed that the material was proper for that application.
The results exonerate Big Blue's fractured kingpin.
Knowing that something is good is just as important as knowing that there's something wrong with it. It's all part of the puzzle that we have to put together.
Now investigators know that the accident was not caused by a failure of Big Blue's boom or cables, and there was no structural flaw in the crane's kingpin. So they turn their attention to suspect number 2. Could Big Blue have been brought down by the ground beneath those 2 massive transport crawlers? At 21,000 tons, Big Blue was an enormously heavy machine. She was one of the biggest cranes in the world. Her real name was the S1-E3, and she was built here by Lamson Crane International. The company's facilities in Kennewick, Washington are a jumble of booms, cabs, and other assorted pieces of blue steel. Cranes and more cranes.
We don't try and do everything. We try and do what we're good at and be the best we can at that. We've got excellent equipment, excellent people, good techniques.
Lift 3s have been operated safely around the world for more than 2 decades, lifting huge pieces of material into place for oil rigs and nuclear power plants. What makes these cranes unique is obvious: size.
As you see the machine behind you, you see that it's quite large, and this is just a middle-sized machine from our fleet. We have made many, many lifts that exceed 1,300 metric tons for a single crane. And the majority of the time, you know, those are made at large radiuses and large heights.
Once assembled, the Lift 3, with its main mast extended as much as 567 feet, operates like a gargantuan teeter-totter. More than 1,000 tons of counterweight keep the structure from toppling as it lifts a load as heavy as a stadium roof section.
The geometry, the physics of it are very, very simple. You get a counterweight a long ways back, you can pick up a load a long ways away.
The Lift sits atop 2 massive crawler transporters that allow it to move with a load. While it's in motion, the counterweight can be moved independently in any direction to balance the load.
What that gives us is the ability to do multiple operations simultaneously. We can travel the machine and swing it at the same time.
The Lift's credentials made it the perfect crane to do the job at Miller Park. Giant roof sections assembled on the ground could be picked up and transported to the stadium within the tight confines of Miller Park. But on July 14th, 1999, the huge crane came tumbling down. Investigators know it wasn't the kingpin, and thanks to the video, they have also ruled out mechanical failure in the boom of the crane. Then, a few days into the investigation, they make a surprising discovery.
Our testimony indicates that there was actually a ground failure early on in the day, which had the crane actually sinking into the ground by some accounts up to a foot when they did the pick.
As a result, the initial pick was stopped and a new route was planned to avoid the problem area. But the question remains, if the ground had settled under Big Blue earlier in the day, is it possible that the same thing happened again later? Could the ground beneath Big Blue have caused the disaster?
It's very important for a crane of this height to be on extremely level ground, because any unlevelness of the ground gets magnified over the height. For this particular crane, The criteria was 3/4 of an inch over a distance of 30 feet. The ground had to be within that tolerance. Otherwise, there was a danger of the crane tilting too much.
To make certain the crane is level and its weight is distributed evenly, concrete runways or mats are built. In the aftermath of the disaster, Big Blue's crawlers and concrete mats remained more or less intact. Investigators test those mats and the soil underneath to determine what role, if any, they may have played in the disaster.
And there were cracks that we noticed that were small cracks, hairline cracks, that were associated with where the crane actually sat.
Each crack is thoroughly examined and mapped. Engineers also hunt for hidden air pockets in the soil below the mats that might have affected the stability of the pad. The high-tech hammer functions like sonar. Sound waves bounce back, exposing any hidden anomalies. Their exhaustive search turns up no evidence that there was a problem with the concrete mats. But the mats are only as good as what they're sitting on. The answer may lie deep below ground. Investigators are concerned that even though the mats are intact, the ground below may have been compressed by the weight of Big Blue, but then sprung back to its original position, erasing any indication of a problem. Probes are used to measure the elasticity of the soil.
Go ahead.
Hydraulic jacks measure how much weight the soil can bear. Was Big Blue too heavy for the concrete mats and the ground beneath them?
There was no evidence of just gross failure of these mats where one could just draw the conclusion that that this was a simple case of a foundation issue.
Another dead end. Ground settlement did not topple Big Blue. Working down their list of suspects, investigators seem to have only one option left. And it's the video that gives them the final clue.
There are a lot of things going on in this video. For one thing, keep your eye on the flag in the upper right and watch the changing wind direction. You can see that it's changing dramatically over a short period of time.
That clue takes investigators down a whole new avenue. And along the way, they discovered the astonishing oversight that brought Big Blue crashing down. July 14th, 1999. Charlie Christie and his radio operator sit on top of Big Blue, running the giant crane's tugger winches. A wind blows through Miller Park, a wind that made Charlie Christie and his colleague uneasy.
And he says, "You feel that?" And I says, "Yeah, I feel that." I says, "That's the wind." When you run crane long as I have, you can feel that. It's like a vibration. It's like if you stick your hand out the window of a car at high speeds, you can feel that vibration that you get from it. It's the same thing.
Wind is every crane operator's worst nightmare, even with a crane the size of Big Blue. Although it carries 1,000 tons of counterweight to balance the load, that does little to counter the effects of wind blowing on the sides of the crane. Measurements taken at a nearby airport shortly before 5 p.m. on the day of the accident showed winds of 20 miles per hour, right at Big Blue's upper safety limit. But this doesn't tell the whole story.
The specifications for the crane said that the crane should not be used in wind speeds of over 20 miles an hour. And that was considering only the wind on the crane itself and not even considering the wind force on the piece that's being lifted.
The piece in question that day was a 450-ton roof section. At first glance, it looks as though the wind would just blow right through it. But experts calculate that the roof section had more surface area than the wing of a Boeing 747. And somehow that detail was overlooked.
The effect of the wind on the piece that was being lifted apparently was never calculated for that particular pick or for any of the previous roof picks on this project.
Was this enough to bring the crane crashing down? The search for an answer will send investigators far afield to examine a suspect they can't even see. When Big Blue collapsed, investigators had half a dozen suspects. Now they've narrowed it down to one: the wind. But how to calculate the wind loads acting on the crane and the roof section it was carrying?
It was a lattice work of shapes that the wind was going in and out of. So the challenge was to use the state-of-the-art analytical techniques to estimate what that might have been.
Investigators turn to the experts at RWDI in Guelph, Ontario. It's one of the top wind engineering firms in the world. They recreate the accident in miniature, inside a wind tunnel. Scale models of Big Blue, the partially completed stadium, and the roof section are made in precise detail. Each piece of the model is mounted so that the effect of the wind can be measured precisely.
In this test, each of the crane and the roof panel was mounted on a separate force balance. And by testing these two items at the same time, then we can get an idea of the total wind action that was acting on the crane at the time of the incident.
Investigators recreate the changing wind conditions on the day of the accident. Sensors measure the invisible forces acting on the models. A smoke wand helps Jason Garber see how the wind plays on the irregular shapes of the crane and the stadium. One possibility is that the side of the stadium magnified the wind effect, acting on the crane and the suspended roof section.
We look at the surroundings direction by direction, and we evaluate how the winds would be affected for each direction.
After 4 days of testing, they pass their data along to David Peraza to interpret.
Due to the direction of the wind and the sail effect on the piece that was being lifted, the crane was essentially subjected to a sideways load that was on the order of 2.5% to 3% of the load being lifted.
3% doesn't sound like much. But investigators estimate that the combination of the wind and the sail effect on the roof section imposed an additional side load on the crane of 6.5 tons. And the wind speed on that day was already at the crane's upper limit. It was more than Big Blue could handle. It took more than 2 years to gather the data and piece together what happened at Miller Park. The finished product? A detailed account of Big Blue's last hours on July 14th, 1999. At 5:14, she carries a 450-ton roof section to the set point at the south end of the stadium. The crew begins lowering the massive piece into place. Inside the stadium, William DeGrave, Jerome Starr, and Jeffrey Wisher are waiting to bolt it into place. They're suspended in the cage of a smaller crane. The mammoth roof section is about 300 feet off the ground when the wind gusts and changes direction. Charlie Christie feels a shudder. As the wind hits the suspended roof section, it generates huge side load on the crane. More than Big Blue was designed to take. The crane's massive kingpin starts to bend. Bolts snap, and the locking ring flies apart right before Charlie Christie's eyes. The roof section, the upper half of the boom, and the jib fall inside the stadium, killing William DeGrave, Jerome Starr, and Jeffrey Wisher. It's all over in less than 30 seconds. In the wake of the accident, the contractor responsible for building the stadium, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries of America, was heavily criticized. Why had they proceeded with the lift despite warnings about the wind conditions that day? Why had they not properly assessed the wind loads of the roof sections that were being lifted? In 2000, a jury finds Mitsubishi Heavy Industries of America 97% negligent in the tragic accident that killed 3 construction workers.
The lessons that can be learned from this accident were actually applied almost immediately as the project continued, was that you needed to explicitly take into account the wind effects on the piece that was being lifted.
As excited crowds file into Miller Park today, it's difficult to imagine the twisted steel and shattered concrete that littered this site not long ago. On the first base line, where so much of Big Blue fell, there is only the Brewers dugout and thousands of excited fans.
But having been there, you know, you can't shake the picture of what you saw. I mean, I look at the batter standing at the plate, you know, and that's where the crane was now, in the infield over there, you know, and I can still see it. I can see the tons of rubble laying over there.
Outside the stadium, a bronze statue depicts 3 construction workers, a permanent tribute to the 3 men that died building Miller Park.